What's going on, everybody? Nick Whalen, Alex Barutha here with you. It's the Monday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Pod. And fittingly, Alex, as I intro the show, my phone is buzzing because we have injury news coming in. Nikola Jokic officially ruled out for tonight. Aaron Gordon's on the injury report. Both Tim Hardaway and Cade Cunningham are now questionable for Tuesday night. We've been saying this for 2 weeks now, but man, this is that time of the season. We always start by reviewing some of the biggest ads in the 16-team RotoWire Stake League. Usually a pretty good gauge as far as what's going to be out there in those deeper competitive leagues. Just some puzzling names. I should say puzzling because they make sense, but just some names that you would not expect. Let's say $24 to be bid on. For example, we had maybe the biggest bidding war of the year for Justin Edwards of the 76ers, who ended up going for $24.
I threw in a keep him honest bid, or at least what I consider to be a keep him honest bid that ended up being the second highest bid, $6 compared to our colleague Tim Schuler's $24 for Justin Edwards. But admittedly, I mean, if you need points, Justin Edwards taking a lot of shots. His efficiency is high, but it's not like 65% or something like that. So I was more than happy to try to snag him, especially when he would have been replacing Moses Moody for me. So to me, I was like, well, I'll just do that.
I wanted him. I didn't have enough fab dollars. I knew I was not going to be in the running. Went all in for Kyle Filipowski a couple of weeks ago, which has been mixed results. Although even when he's not playing that many minutes, like he's just out there chucking. Like Kyle, he'll play like 19 minutes off the bench and still give you 18 points and 8 boards. Absolutely nothing on the defensive end, which is kind of killing me. Would like just a block or a steal here and there. I was actually watching, I forget who they were even playing. I was watching a Jazz game over the weekend. Just horrible rim protection from Filipowski. He was just constantly getting beat for buckets at the rim. So maybe be expecting defensive stats was the real error here. But yeah, I mean, Justin Edwards is going to be one of those guys. I hesitate to call him a league winner, but he's definitely going to be a league difference maker this week and probably down the stretch if your league does continue beyond this week. And I think even more so tonight against New Orleans, because not only are Embiid and Paul George out, Tyrese Maxey's out again, but we are seeing the Sixers resting Quentin Grimes as well.
It'll be a big night for him. I think when you get down to it, I think the core of Justin Edwards' stat profile is he's a 3-and-D guy.
Yeah.
But obviously there's just a certain amount of volume, just not 3-pointers that you're going to have to take because you're going to end up with the ball in your hands with 6 seconds left. And someone's got to do something with it.
He's been turning the ball over quite a bit as well. I mean, really, the entire Sixers team has. This should be a wild game, by the way, because no McCollum tonight for the Pelicans. I believe Zion has already been ruled out as well. He has. So, let's see what our projected starting lineups are here at RotoWire. For the Sixers, we are expecting it to be Jeff Doughton, Jared Butler, Justin Edwards, Ricky Council, and Gershon Yabusele. That rivals anything that we saw from the process Sixers, 10 years ago. Pelicans should likely start Alvarado, Hawkins, Jeremiah Robinson, Earl, Olynyk, and Missi.
Wow. It's kind of insane because we right on our daily lineups page, we have the on-off court stat button, and so it's like whatever combination of players are out, you click that button and it tells you these are the players who get the biggest usage boost. And obviously a ton of players out for Philadelphia, but even with this many players out for Philadelphia, we still have a sample size of Jeff Doughton playing 100 minutes with all of those guys off the court for a 26% usage rate. And Ricky Council, 107 minutes, 28% usage rate. So it's like you actually, there are a million guys out, but we actually do have some vague idea of what
that is.
The 76ers might try to do.
Outrageous. So we mentioned the bidding war for Justin Edwards. I think we expected him to be the highest priced acquisition this week. That was indeed the case. You said you missed out on Justin Edwards, but you did make a big addition at center, Alex.
Kai Jones paid up big time for him, $15. And I know AD is questionable and he might come back tonight. I really don't have a lot of faith in that. I also think that they could see time on the court together. AD at the 4, Kai Jones at the 5, because that's basically what they were going to do before AD got hurt.
Maybe, yeah.
Not Kai Jones, but with Lively and Gafford at center and AD. So and he's on a 2-way contract, but that's way more flexible when he signed it in March compared to a 10-day contract. And Kai Jones, obviously for for all of his flaws, is still like great blocks, great rebounds. He just dunks everything. So as long as he can play 20 minutes regularly, basically from now until the end of the season, I think it's a fine pickup for me, especially because I need stats and field goal percentage.
Even if Anthony Davis comes back, one, how many minutes is he going to play? I mean, what, 20 to 25 would be the absolute max, I would think. And it's also the front end of a back-to-back for the Mavs. So there's 0% chance that Anthony Davis is playing in both of those games. So I think you're getting at least one high minute game out of Kai Jones to begin the week. We'll see. They play at Orlando on Thursday and then at Chicago on Saturday. One bad matchup, one good matchup. But I think, given your position in this league, you're probably going to be fine finishing in the top half, but, just trying to shore up some blocks, shore up some rebounds, some high field goal percentage points. I have no problem paying up for Kai Jones. We saw Jordan Goodwin added for $9. I get it. I do think, though, with the Lakers healthier now, considerably less upside with Jordan Goodwin. Still played a decent amount of minutes against Chicago, but that was also a game that turned into a blowout. So a lot of that came, in the fourth quarter. Wasn't really in on him this week. Matisse Thybulle was picked up. That was somebody I wanted. I really need blocks and steals specifically this week. There's a 3-way tie right now in steals in this league between me and the guy who ended up getting him, Aaron Quinn, who is just super sharp in this league every single year. He ended up paying $8 for Thybulle. I did not have $8 left in order to pay up, but obviously we haven't thought about Thybulle in forever. He just recently got healthy, but every single year, he's one of those guys that, he's not going to rank all that well. Like the stats are very odd, but if you need blocks and especially if you need steals, that one makes a lot of sense. We saw Trendon Watford added. And I know we got a question about Watford in the chat, so we'll hit him up in a little bit. KCP, Cody Martin, Bryce Sensabaugh, Trey Lyles, the other Jalen Williams, Tyrese Martin. These are the kind of names that we're talking about at this point. Mark in the chat said, Trendon Watford, are we taking the risk here? What say you on Watford?
I mean, Watford is very established as a tank commander. We know that. Last year, the year before, Portland, Brooklyn, he's all in when it comes to a guy who can rack up numbers for you on a tanking team. And I think it's worth taking a risk. I mean, he's just very well-rounded for his position. He's not going to be like the most efficient scorer out there, but he'll get you the high assist game. He'll get you some steals and some blocks. Occasionally he'll pop for rebounds. And the reality is Noah Clowney is not that good. I was hoping I think I've tried to drop Noah Clowney either 2 or 3 straight weeks in my 16-team league and haven't been able to pull it off. And I think they've kind of like he had to play 26 minutes the other night, basically did nothing. Yeah. Honestly, I think they've kind of seen enough this season from Clowney, and I think they're fine just rolling it out there with Watford.
He's got a 4-game week. More than half the league plays a 3-game week this week. So if you're in a weekly lineup league, you're probably panicking about that. I've done a lot of checking on other people's schedules this week, Alex, and everybody's pretty much in the same boat. Like there's very few people out there who have, majority 4-game week. I'm lucky that Giannis is on a 4-game week. Hopefully he plays them all. Same with Scotty Barnes. But for the Nets, I mean, 3 of these are really good matchups too, by net standards, if there is such a thing. They play Dallas tonight, Toronto on Wednesday, bad matchup against the Clippers on Friday. That could be a blowout, but then Washington on Saturday. So you got 3 games in there against bad defenses and should all be competitive games.
Yeah, and I think, Watford has had I don't want to say high minutes floor, but he's playing about 20 minutes every single night. And, on a 4-game week in a good matchup, and he's playing well lately. I don't mind the risk. Maybe not a 12-team guy. That really depends on your league. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a deeper league, he has to be at least like on your watch list.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, tell you about a message from our sponsors. After that, we will hit some questions from the chat. We'll talk about some risers and fallers as we start to look ahead to next season. But first, March Madness is here, and if you're looking for a way to get in the game, it's time to check out Rebet, the ultimate social sportsbook and casino platform. With over 100 leagues on the sportsbook and 25-plus 24/7 live dealer casino games, we are striving to give users an experience they haven't had elsewhere. All March long, Rebet is rolling out daily promos, making it the ultimate month of exciting offers for their fans. And right now, for a limited time, Rebet is matching your first purchase up to $100 in Rebet cash. All you got to do is use the promo code ROTOWIRE, ROTOWIRE. Go download Rebet today on the App Store or the Google Play Store. Enter the code ROTOWIRE and start playing with your promo funds. It's time to play, predict, and experience the madness only on Rebet. Aaron in the chat says, is it panic button time for CJ McCollum? Is it time to drop, or is he just resting on a back-to-back? The way the Pelicans have handled this, as someone who has CJ McCollum in my most important league, I'm very dialed in on the CJ McCollum night-to-night experience. We've seen the good and the bad over this last week and a half. He went 1 for 15 from the field last week against Detroit to start off the week. Didn't love that. Had 40 against Detroit yesterday. That's kind of what you live with right now with CJ McCollum. He's basically the only guy out there for the Pelicans. He has been resting on back-to-backs. This goes back to really not that long, really only the end of February. He rested at the end of a back-to-back last game of February, and then it happened again a couple of weeks ago. That was a Houston-Memphis back-to-back on March 8th and 9th. I'm inclined to believe, based on what we've seen from the Pelicans, that that's probably what this is, but it is only a 3-game week for New Orleans. They have 3 days off after this game on Monday against the 76ers. They play Golden State Friday and Charlotte on Sunday. If you're in a daily moves league, maybe it's worth trying to shuffle in somebody, again, because the Pelicans don't play until Friday. If you drop McCollum, you have a little bit more flexibility there. I am personally expecting him to play Friday and Sunday because those are not back-to-back situations. But the league where I have him is a weekly lineups league, so he will not be in my lineup.
Daily lineups leagues, you have more flexibility, like Nick said. I'll lean on Nick's advice since he's the one who's had to deal with McCollum all season long.
Dude, him and Van Vliet, Van Vliet's worse, significantly worse. The inconsistency night to night. It's like you're either getting 10 3-pointers and 37 points, or he's going 2 of 14 from the field with 6 turnovers. Like there's no in between with Van Vliet. He's either like the worst or the best player in the NBA any given night. It's just been a brutal roller coaster ride. Aaron also asked, we were talking about Justin Edwards. If you had a choice between Edwards and Yabusele this week, where do you go?
I think it entirely depends on if you have any sort of. I think if you need rebounds like badly, you can go to Yabusele, but he hasn't even been like great there. So I think I would probably lean Edwards.
I would lean Edwards as well. I mean, Yabusele is also rested here and there, whereas Edwards hasn't really. I mean, it's impossible to predict what the Sixers are going to do at this point in the season. But we've seen Yabusele out of the lineup more than Edwards, and really at this point, it's more about games played than anything. Admiral Nita, a regular commenter on these shows, always appreciate you chiming in. Taking a look at the Pelicans, who will again be without CJ McCollum at least to begin the week. They play Monday, Friday, Sunday. If you're looking at what's left in New Orleans and you're looking to stream one of these 3, who would it be? Jose Alvarado, Jordan Hawkins, or Missi?
I don't think any of these guys are inherently better than the other. I think the thing that makes your process easier is that if you need assists, you go Alvarado. If you need points, you go Hawkins. If you need rebounds, you go Missi. Now, if you're asking like broadly, who's the best option? Maybe Hawkins or Alvarado, because Alvarado, at least like the assists are not easy to find off the wire, and he'll get you some steals. And Missi's bad games, when he has them, you get like nothing. You get like nothing out of him. And I know 9, 8, and 1 with 2 blocks is fine, but he'll have like the 2-2 game or I don't know. I think it's entirely depending on your needs.
Also worth noting that as we record this on Monday afternoon, Missi is questionable to start the week. Did not play yesterday against Detroit, so that might end up kind of breaking the tie for you. Joseph says, do I go with 4 games out of Justin Champagnie from the Wizards, or Emmanuel Quickley, who has 4 games, but who knows how many he plays?
That's brutal. I think I would still. I might just lean Quickley. I mean,
he is going to play tonight.
Yeah, so if he's going to play tonight, the thing is, like, Champagnie's been fine, but it was more like we were recommending Justin Champagnie more when he played 3 straight games of over 30 minutes. And it's like, if Justin Champagnie gets 30 minutes, you roster him. If he's playing like 20, his like past 3 games have been averaging 23 minutes. I think I would just go with Quickley, to be honest.
I would not count on him playing all 4 games. I think if you get 3 out of Quickley, you're excuse me, you're happy with that. For what it's worth, most of the games that he's missed of late have been either front or back end of a back-to-back. Like he sat out yesterday against the Spurs. Now he's going to play tonight. They don't have a back-to-back this week, so I'd be a little bit more optimistic about it, I guess. But they also keep resting RJ Barrett. Who's to say that they wouldn't extend that to quickly, and even Scotty Barnes at some point? I'm going to be crossing my fingers on Scotty Barnes. I got to throw him out there on a 4-game week, but you're always kind of bracing for the worst in these situations. What should I do with Maxey and Kelly Oubre, both of whom have been ruled out tonight for the Sixers?
I mean, Maxey, be pretty shocking if he came back at this point, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
So I don't want to. It's hard to say like you have to drop him. Same for Oubre, but I would almost be more surprised if they came back. I feel like this is a rock and a hard place. I honestly, this is the right question to ask because both of these guys are worth rostering if they're playing. But I feel like you're rocking a hard place, and that any decision you make may end up being the wrong decision, just for reasons that are totally out of your control. Like it feels like whatever decision you make, you're on the wrong end of it, right? When you and I always talk about the Harrison Barnes, like you pick him up and he sucks, and then you drop him and he scores 20 points a game on 75% shooting. I feel like this is kind of the equivalent of that.
Well, what we need to keep in mind is that the Sixers pick is top 6 protected. They currently have the 5th worst record, well, they're tied actually at 5/6 with Brooklyn. They're both 23-48. And they play the Pelicans, who have the 4th worst record tonight. They play the Wizards, who have the worst record on Wednesday. And they play Toronto, another team in that mix. They're only a game ahead, quote unquote, of Toronto in the lottery standings. So, right. Obviously, we've known that the Sixers season is over for a while, but like this is a specifically very important week for them to lose games. So I would be surprised if Maxey especially is back. Oubre, who knows? They weren't as aggressive in resting him, but tonight will be his 7th absence in a row. So if you can avoid both of those guys, I think I would. Another Sixers adjacent question here for Peter. He says, head-to-head points league, Adam Bona or Kelly Olynyk?
So Bona's going to make his return, presumably, tonight after missing 5 straight. And before that, I mean, he'd been playing pretty well, averaging basically 14 and 9 with 2 blocks and a steal. I mean, he can rack up numbers. He's a permanent guy. Olynyk, also a permanent guy. Head-to-head points. Interesting. I feel like Olynyk gives you more points upside, but to me, I'm not. I wouldn't stress this one too much. I don't think I have a real preference here.
Kenny says, I dropped Anthony Davis early last week during my playoffs because I needed to win the week. I didn't think he would actually come back. Still in the playoffs, but wow. So no question here. Just some commentary on the Dallas Mavericks. And I guess we can go a little bit deeper on AD. I mean, is the whole goal here just to save a little bit of face, just to get a very small PR win if you're the Mavericks? I mean, maybe they need Anthony Davis to come back so they don't have to forfeit games. That could be part of it. I would be very surprised if we see full bore 38 minutes a night Anthony Davis at any point in the next 3 weeks. Like, why does that make sense?
It doesn't. But yeah, there's a lot of competing, like you mentioned it, there's a lot of competing, I don't know if narratives is the right word, a lot of competing factors where it's, you make this trade and then he gets hurt and now you're in this position where if he comes back, it feels like a risk, and Kyrie's out and all this other stuff. And, but I think the point you made is what I would hammer home too, which is how many games from now until the end of the season is Anthony Davis going to play more than 25 minutes? He's not going to play in any back-to-backs. And how will, if they're shut out of the playoffs, will they shut him down? My guess would be yes. So I feel like from now until that happens, I think it's possible AD plays like 4 or 5 games, averages like 25 minutes a game, and that's it. And given the uncertainty about how often he's going to play in his minutes, that may not even be really worth. Basically, what I'm trying to say is I don't think you were in the wrong for dropping AD, and I don't think it's going to really, really come back to bite you.
9-cat league, would you rather have Donovan Clingan or Naz Reid? We'll say just for the week ahead.
I think that's just rebounds and blocks dependent.
Yeah, both teams have 3 games. I think Naz Reid is going to give you a slightly higher ceiling. He's the guy that's capable of giving you 24 points and 5 threes off the bench. Like, you're not getting that from Clingan. but you're getting higher volume rebounds. You're getting higher volume blocks. Clingan basically is either blocking 3 or 4 shots or 0 shots. There doesn't seem to be an in between. And Naz Reid gives you about 1 steal, 1 block per game. So I still think I would lean Naz Reid here. I know Clingan is kind of working his way back from an illness. He did play in the Blazers last game. Portland does still have something to play for. I mean, they're only 2.5 out of the 10 seed. Suns have a really tough schedule over the next couple of weeks. I think their next 9 games are all against top 5 teams in either conference. So I don't expect Portland to pull back. But I think Naz is probably the call, especially if Anthony Edwards sits out tonight. There could be some big time trickle down for Naz Reid going up against Indiana. Jeremy asks, is Willie, I almost said Willie Cauley-Stein, Wendell Carter Jr. Wow, worth picking up for the Magic. On that note, is it better to optimize games earlier with better waiver wire pickups, or wait to see what you need as the week progresses with whoever's available? So this is obviously a daily moves league, but we'll start with Wendell Carter for the Orlando Magic. So looking at the schedule for Orlando, back-to-back to start the week. They play the Lakers tonight. They play at Charlotte on Tuesday, home for Dallas on Thursday, and then they finish out with Sacramento on Saturday. So they are one of the 4-game week teams.
Talk about someone with inconsistent box scores, man, is Wendell Carter Jr.
Oh, yeah.
This has to be some of the most just reading his past 5 or 6, it's like 16 points, 12 boards, 4.6 rebounds, 16 points, 14 rebounds, 4 points, 2 rebounds, 8 points, 4. It's just terrible. It's like up and down. Is he worth picking up? I mean, I think on aggregate over the course of 3 or 4 games, the stats are going to be fine. But if you're picking whether to start him I have to pick him on Tuesday, do I start him or not on Thursday or Friday? You might get screwed and pick all of his bad games. And then in your broader question, do you wait to see what you need as the week progresses, or do you try to, hit optimize games with waiver wires early? At this point of the year, I think you just wait and see on a lot of stuff. The amount of sitting, resting, just random stuff that can happen, you're almost better off just like looking day by day and trying to optimize day to day and by the schedule.
Are there any good Knicks players for this week, specifically for their back-to-back set? So the Knicks do not play tonight on Monday. They play Tuesday, Wednesday, back-to-back against Dallas and the Clippers. Both those games are at MSG. Then they're at Milwaukee on Friday and home for Portland on Sunday. So kind of a weird travel week, going to Milwaukee and then returning home. Mitchell Robinson was somebody that I took a very hard look at in some leagues. He has not played back-to-back since he came back, though. So I would expect this to be a 3-game week at max for him. And, he's kind of had a little bit of the Wendell Carter as well, where, 13, 11, and 2 blocks. And then the next game, 4 points, 5 rebounds, 1 block. I think if you're desperate for rebounds and blocks, Mitchell Robinson is where I would point you. I mean, McBride is banged up right now as well. So maybe they have to dip a little bit deeper into some of that guard depth. But, we're talking campaign, Landry Shamet. Jalen Brunson probably is not going to return this week. Maybe late in the week, but even then he'd be a little bit limited. Precious Achiuwa might still be floating out there in some shallower leagues.
Yeah, a lot of this depends on McBride. So just keep an eye on McBride, because if he doesn't play, then you may be able to stream in like Campaign or Shamet or Olynyk actually played well the other night, which was out of nowhere. And yeah, I agree with your Mitch Rob take. Very untrustworthy, and a lot of these guys are not going to be available on those guys are going to be available on your waiver wire. McBride is not going to be available on your waiver wire, most likely.
All right, we'll hit this one, and then we'll move on, and we'll revisit some questions in the chat later in the show. But big question here from Polar OW. Says, I'm in my league semifinals this week. Do we think Jokic will come back in time? It's a 3-game week for Denver. He's already been ruled out tonight against Chicago. So we're looking at 2 games max. They are home all week. I think that helps. You don't often see guys like this, return mid-road trip. So he could play Wednesday against Milwaukee. If not, maybe Friday against Utah. You probably feel like you can win the Utah game without him. I don't know. I mean, Jokic is not historically somebody who's missed time unless he has to.
Yeah, I guess the latest news we have is Michael Malone said Jokic is expected to return during the home trip, or homestand, I should say. So, yeah, maybe he comes back against Milwaukee, sits against Utah, because they're I'm trying to give him some extra rest. Yeah, you might get. The thing is, Jokic is so good. Even if you only get one game out of
Oh yeah.
him, he's probably worth starting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's also worth noting that homestand extends through next Wednesday. So, it's a longer timetable, and they play a back-to-back next Tuesday and Wednesday. So, again, if we're kind of going with this theme of cautiousness, I don't know if he plays both sets of that. One of those games is against the Spurs, who you probably could beat without Nikola Jokic. So it's dicey, but you bring up a good point. I mean, 2 games of Nikola Jokic is probably going to be better than 3 out of, whatever big man you're picking up off the scrap heap, whether it's Adam Bona or Mitchell Robinson or whoever. All right, we'll get back to the chat. We'll hit some more questions later in the show. But one of the bigger themes that I wanted to discuss, Alex, is just season-long risers, season-long fallers. Guys we're viewing differently now than we were on draft day. Guys will have to think long and hard about going into next year. We'll start on the positive side. And for me, Karl-Anthony Towns, I think there were a lot of questions, moving from Minnesota to New York, joining this loaded starting lineup, a team that, runs through Jalen Brunson. I think this has been close to a best case scenario fantasy season for Cat.
Yeah, Cat's been amazing, man. I wish I would have taken a couple more gambles on him in my leagues, but I drafted most of my leagues, or a lot of my leagues, before that trade happened, and just the way it turned out and during on draft day. But yeah, I mean, he kind of took a little bit of a hit when he had his like hand or thumb injury or whatever he's dealing with. But the reality is he's putting up, I mean, what does he rank? Even six, technically an 8 cap per game. Yeah, I mean, you can't really ask for anything more out of him. And I think he is. It really helps that he's playing his natural position at the 5. I think you totally forget like how much of a rebounding hit he was taking, playing like 32 minutes a game next to Gobert.
Yeah, no question about that. I also have Cade Cunningham on the list. Not necessarily surprising that he took the leap that he did, but you look at the ADPs, like in ESPN leagues, he was going around pick 17, 18, Yahoo leagues quite a bit later, even underdog best balls where you tend to see people take more stabs. He was like pick 35 to 40 in a lot of those leagues. He's going to end up finishing in all likelihood as a first round value in terms of per game numbers. And yeah, I think still a little bit of room for improvement, on the defensive stats. He's right at 1 steal per game, 0.7 blocks, for a guard. That's solid, but still only 2.1 made threes per game. You think that could rise. The free throw percentage is great. Field goal percentage is great. 9.2 assists per game. I think he's somebody that we're going to see certainly in the first round of a lot of drafts next year. I got Dyson Daniels on the list for obvious reasons. Just the steals god. If you're in a category league, pretty much single-handedly winning you that one. Trey Murphy, of course, tough way for his year to end, and we'll see, how the recovery goes from that shoulder injury, but he was on a hell of a run prior to that. As of right now, he is 38th in per game value in 8 cat leagues. Obviously has missed a lot of time, and that's something you have to factor in, but really good player who I think went a little bit undercovered because of everything that was going on in New Orleans. Jamal Murray, Alex, I was surprised at where Jamal Murray ranks this year per game value, 22nd in 8 cat leagues. And, the numbers don't necessarily jump off the page, but he is closer to a steal and a half per game, almost 2.5 made threes, 89% at the line, 48% from the field, helping him out quite a bit.
The minutes are good too. He's up. I mean, the minutes haven't really been the primary reason his stats, he's having a great year, but it certainly helps. And yeah, great free throw shooter. I mean, Murray is always someone I feel like I find myself being more willing to draft Jamal Murray than a lot of other people. I feel like over the past 2 to 3 years, I've consistently drafted Murray in like the 40 to 55 range.
Yep.
And a lot of people are like, he has no ceiling and he's hurt all the time. But it's really hard to, I mean, there's just not that many players in the NBA that you're going to get in that draft range that are, going to give you 22 and 6 on good efficiency with at least a steal. So, yeah, I have liked Murray a lot.
Other names on my list here, Josh Hart, who currently ranks 30th in 8 cap per game. He was going, in the 75 to 85 range in a lot of drafts. Josh Giddey, who's not like blowing his ADP out of the water, but I think the way he's closing the season, it certainly is noteworthy. And, to me, that one could have gone either way, right? You're taking a stab on a guy. There was a lot of projection, as far as the landing spot in Chicago. Obviously things ended pretty poorly in Oklahoma City. And I really don't have a whole lot of Josh Giddey. I kind of stayed away at that elevated ADP, but that's paid off. Ivica Zubac, the number one guy I wish I would have drafted more of. I mean, he was just so available.
Yeah.
So available. And we talked about it, all off season. I'm like, oh, I'm going to load up on Zubac. And, he's the guy, especially in the RotoWire stake league, the one that I just wish I would have, paid the extra $1, pay the extra $2, whatever it takes, because I think in a lot of ways we saw this season coming, and, for whatever reason, I just wasn't willing to shell out for it. But I mean, he's been incredible. He was still being drafted in the late 80s, early 90s in a lot of leagues. Like he was going after D'Angelo Russell, after Kyle Kuzma, after Keegan Murray in terms of preseason ADP.
Yeah, Zubac, I think we sort of underrate how good Harden can make a big man, especially if that big man is given like a longer minutes leash, like Zubac has been given. And it is one of those things where per minute he's always been really good. That's why his name's been hanging around fantasy circles, right? It's always like, well, after pick 100 and I need a center, Zubac every single year. And then if you get any sort of hint that it's like, well, he had never proved he could play 30 to 35 minutes a game regularly, and now that he's doing it, he's probably can handle it.
I know. It was so obvious, dude. It was so obvious. He is 56 overall in 8-cat leagues. And, we're looking at per game value here, but Zubac also doesn't miss time. Yeah, I think that is like the other, and it's so rare for a big man, especially one who goes that late. You could just pencil him in for 75 plus games, 16.5 points, 12.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 1.2 blocks, 62% from the field. I mean, we can quibble about the free throw percentage, but if that's a big hit for Zubac, I think you're willing to live with that. The last two names on my list, Amen Thompson, obviously, that's kind of a free space here. Very interested to see where he's going to end up going next year. And Jaden McDaniels. We've had a lot of success, Alex, betting the Jaden McDaniels prop markets this year. They have not really caught up for whatever reason. It hasn't mattered if Randall's been out there or not. I mean, he has just developed into such a consistent scorer, so efficient. Yeah, I was looking at, I think it was since February 1st. Like he's been close to like 50, 40, 90 territory. And yeah, the volume's not always going to be there, but he's just like consistent, like 16, 7, 8 rebounds every single night for this team.
It's clear why. He's someone who's always been better in real life than in fantasy. Yeah. You see him out there defensively, the hustle he gives, the offensive rebounding has been solid. It's just the offense, and that's come along more, like you mentioned, because and I still feel like this when I watch him. He feels like he's already made up his mind when he gets the ball. He's like, I'm going to drive and I'm going to shoot, and it doesn't really feel like it's organic what he's doing.
Yeah,
but that doesn't matter as much as because he's just been a better player in terms of more efficient, and yeah, he stepped up big time when guys were hurt. That was huge.
Anybody that I missed here? Any obvious, big time risers year over year?
Big time risers.
I didn't want to list like 30 guys. I mean, there are certainly other names out there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there was some confusion. Not confusion. I will say Malik Monk has been good. Some of that has been the trade.
Yeah.
Of De'Aaron Fox lately, but I think there was a lot of people like his ADP on Yahoo was 131. And I know I've been more willing to draft Monk than other people because I'm like, well, if I draft him at 110, he's probably going to hang out on my bench. And then if De'Aaron Fox gets hurt, it's like, well, he's going to be a top 75 player, Yeah. And I think a lot of guys like that, when they hit, it's worth the risk.
Yeah.
Other than that, there's a couple guys late, but
yeah. Aaron says Josh Hart, Cat. Yep, they're both on the list. If you're just tuning in, those were a couple of the guys we mentioned. I think Tyler Herro maybe be another one, top 35 guy right now in per game value. I think it's kind of getting lost in just this disastrous stretch for the Heat where they lost 10 in a row before winning their last game. I mean, he's still putting up numbers. It's just kind of down to him and Bam Adebayo. On the negative side of things, I think guys who we're going to see fall in ADP next year, obviously Joel Embiid, not much to say about that. If you took the risk, you knew what you were signing up for. You knew what the worst case was, and we basically got that. Drew Holiday totally fell off the map. You talk about a guy who's a better real life player than a fantasy player at this point. I mean, just kind of a disaster if you took him inside the top 100. I got a couple of names I want to run by you, Alex. We could talk about Paul George. Obviously there's been a fall off there. John Morant's been disappointing to me. Obviously some of that has been missed time, but the numbers as well. What about Jaren Jackson? Like he rates okay, it wasn't necessarily the season that maybe we were hoping for, but he's still a top 35 guy. But the blocks have not come back. I think part of the thinking with Jaren Jackson this year was, okay, you got a real center in Zach Edey. He can kind of go back to playing the 4, roaming around, contesting shots at the rim. He's at 1.6 blocks per game, 1.3 steals. It's fine, but we're a couple years removed from him blocking 3+ shots per game.
The really annoying part about that is that his foul rate is like the same.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how you're blocking fewer shots, but also committing the same amount of fouls. What is happening? And he has been a little bit better on the steals. Yeah. So I think some of this is coaching where it's like, well, you're selling out a lot for blocks, and maybe it's better for you to like play the pass and then try to, really just contest the shot at the very, very end of the offensive player's take. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he's mostly avoided the injury bug. I think based on what we've seen the past few years, it really just like some guys just settle into a range in terms of fantasy. Like some guys basically, no matter what, the way their stats end up, they're always between like 30 and 45. Because sometimes Vucevic, right? Some years they'll score better, some years they'll rebound better, some years they get an extra steal here or there. But ultimately, they're kind of who they are, and I think that's where we're at with Jaren Jackson.
Bam Adebayo is the name that I had to throw on the list. Disappointing season for Bam. 52nd overall in per game, was being drafted in the 25 to 33-ish range, depending on which ADP you're looking at. I mean, not a disastrous season, but this feels like 3 years in a row where it's like, all right, this might be the year. He finally takes the leap. I mean, he's down in just about every category. He's playing more minutes than he was last season. He's on pace to play significantly more games. He played 71 a year ago. I don't think he's even missed a single game this year. 17.5 points, under 10 rebounds. The assists, I guess, are slightly up by like 0.4 per game, but he's down to 0.7 blocks per game. I mean, that's like where he was as a rookie when he was playing 19 minutes a game. Steals have been solid, 1.3. Field goal percentage is down, free throw percentage still hanging around the mid 70s. It showed some signs as a 3-point shooter last year. It wasn't a ton of volume, but was actually, relatively efficient. That hasn't really stuck. It just kind of feels like the ceiling that we thought Bam Adebayo had 2, 3, 4 years ago. I just don't know if that's there anymore.
Yeah, I don't think his ceiling is really there. I mean, he's already 27. So, I mean, yeah. But if you look at I think his fantasy value this year is entirely tied to his 3-point percentage. So you look at his 3-point percentage from October through January. October through January. So basically like until very recently.
Yep.
And he was shooting 28% from 3 on 2.4 attempts per game. That brings his field goal percentage down to 46 as well. And he was averaging 16 points per game. Then you go from February until now, he's shooting 37% on 3 threes a game. His field goal percentage now flies up to 53%, and he's averaging 21 a game.
Yeah.
So again, it's just the threes. Like this is the problem when big man starts shooting threes, and then they it's not right for their game, and they're not used to it. And all of a sudden, it destroys their fantasy value. And let's put it this way: if you bought low on Bam in January, you're loving it right now. That's for sure.
Is it fair to call Alperen Sengun somewhat of a disappointment this year? And if you look at the season-long fantasy ranking, it's a little out of whack, if you're including free throws, of course, because he takes 5-6 a game. He hits them at 66%. But yeah, this is a guy that was going in the top 30 in a lot of drafts. You're kind of forecasting a big leap, and he's up about a rebound per game, but his scoring is down about 2 points per game. Assists are almost exactly the same. Steals, blocks, almost exactly the same. Field goal percentage is down a bit. Another guy struggling from 3. He's taking 1.5 threes per game, hitting them at 24%. He's been totally fine, much like Bam. It's not the reason that you're winning or losing your league, but did not necessarily take the step forward that I think some people thought he would.
I feel very similar to Sengun the way I feel about Bam, which is he might need to just kind of stop taking threes. Yeah. I thought Sengun would turn into a decent 3-point shooter. I don't really know if that's in the cards for him. And to be honest, I was very critical about Evan Mobley turning into a 3-point shooter, and he has.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, if Sengun takes down the 3-point attempts or he gets a little bit better, I think he's totally fine. Maybe the bigger issue is that there are stretches where Ime Udoka is like, let's just play Jabari Smith Jr. because we need defense. And so there'll be these games where, Sengun plays 26, 27 minutes because he's just not good defensively and he's having maybe even a bad offensive night. So I'm not really, really concerned going forward, but I think next year he'll probably get drafted 50 instead of 30.
All right, we'll get back to the chat here. Go rapid fire through a few more questions before we get out of here. Not a question, Alex, but a statement. I believe this is directed at you. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark.
Oh, I don't know.
He says, for a second, I thought I was looking at Hartenstein doing a podcast. And Daniel says, Hartenstein would not rock a Bucks hat. So have you ever gotten that comp before?
Never gotten the Hartenstein comp. I used to get Bogut all the time. I used to get Bogut. Oh, yeah. Yeah, because when I was younger, no facial hair. My hair was longer. So Bogut basically and I had the same hair that was like the longer kind of flowy. Yeah. And yeah, I would get the Bogut comp all the time.
Somebody coming up to you and saying like, hey, you look like the second center for the Oklahoma City Thunder in Madison, Wisconsin would be wild. Like it's not necessarily that you don't look like him. It's that people don't know who he is. I think that's maybe the bigger issue here. Daniel also asked, would you drop Tari Eason for Scottie Pippen Jr., 10-team, 9-cat head-to-head?
In a 10-team league, I think I'm okay with this. I mean, Pippen's a little dependent on Morant being out.
Yes.
But his minutes have been more consistent over the past month than they were before. But yeah, Eason, when everyone's healthy, sometimes Eason is the odd man out.
Yep.
Sometimes that's the way it is. So I'm fine with that. I'm surprised this is an option in a 10-team league, but also tons of guys are out. So I guess we are at the point where 10-team leagues have sort of turned into 12-team leagues.
Yeah, pretty much. I think when you're removing like 8 teams that you trust from the player pool, all of a sudden things do shrink quite a bit. Aldama or Herder rest of season, 9-cat head-to-head. Sneaky good question here because Kevin Herter is actually playing some ball.
Yeah, Aldama started the other night. This is tough because Aldama is another guy he'll have his moments and then he'll go away. But honestly, he's been really consistent certainly by his standards for 2 months. I think this just comes down to whether or not you need threes. If you need threes, I would go with Herter. If you just kind of want more well-rounded production or well-rounded upside, I would probably go with Aldama.
All right, I had Max Strus last week and was wondering if it's worth it to drop him for Trendon Watford. We talked a little Watford earlier in the show. So, yeah, I mean, Max Strus, probably about an average week for him, right? Where it scored 24 against the Clippers, 12 against the Kings, kind of up and down 3-point shooting, had 3 threes against Phoenix, and then didn't really do much against Utah yesterday. That was a blowout. Cavs do have 4 games this week. They play Portland Tuesday, back-to-back against the Spurs and the Pistons Thursday, Friday, and then the Clippers on Sunday. So, Strus or Watford?
I think Strus is kind of who his numbers say he is. I don't really expect any sort of like fluctuation from 9 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, which are his season averages. Watford has more upside at this point, and his floor is almost the same now as Strus. So I don't think it's a big deal either way.
The one thing I would say with this being a cat league is if you're in a battle for 3-pointers, I think I would roll the dice on Strus because, Trendon Watford has 2 games this year where he's taken more than 4 threes. Strus is still capable of giving you the 5 for 8 game, so if you're in a battle in that category, I would give it to Strus. Otherwise, I think Watford may be a little bit more well-rounded. Kenny says, I assume this means he needs threes, points, free throw percentage, assists, and steals. I don't know. Oh, okay. This is in relation, to the Aldama or Herter question. So following up, Aldama or Herter, he says he could also drop Keontae George and or Norman Powell to add both of those. So do we like Keontae George and Norman Powell better than Aldama and Herter?
I think there's an argument for. Yeah, I mean, Powell hasn't been that good since he came back. His shot attempts have been pretty low. Like his usage has not been great. Maybe that gets back. Maybe it doesn't. Keontae George was playing really well over a stretch. and he has been playing pretty well. I don't know.
They do have a back-to-back later this week, the Jazz. So that worries me a little bit. I personally, I would probably just chance it on Norman Powell. He's been back for 4 games now. Like you said, the shooting hasn't been good, but he did take 12 shots against OKC. Tough matchup last night. Prior to that, had taken only 8 and 6. Minutes have been limited. He was back up to 31 minutes. So I will trust the larger sample, I guess, with Norman Powell. We have like 50 games of him being awesome, and the rest of these guys are a lot more speculative. So that's where I would lean, but it's a little bit tougher than it should be. Nerdy Nerd says, what's the update on Morant's injury? Is he out this week? We have nothing on Ja Morant quite yet. And Memphis hasn't played since Friday. So we got kind of a long lead up here. They don't play till tomorrow, so we might not get an actual update for another 24 hours or so. They're at Utah, at OKC, home for the Lakers on Saturday. Obviously, best case scenario is he plays in all 3 of those games. I don't know that I would count on that.
Yeah, I mean, the question is talk about hamstring injuries all the time. Guys get re-hurt so often with those. So I don't know if you bother bringing him back against Utah. And honestly, I don't know if you bother bringing him back against the Thunder. Right, and then you play the Lakers. Maybe you bring him back, but then a back-to-back against Boston, Golden State. That's really tough. So I don't think it's looking great. For Morant playing more than like 1 or 2 games this week.
All right, we'll end on this one. Who do I drop to pick up Anthony Davis, or maybe bring Davis off of IL? 9-cat 10-team league. So the options are Pritchard, Naz Reid, Pirtle, Poole, Quickly, Duren, Anunoby, Dylan Brooks, Khalil Ware, Donovan Clingan.
This is not easy. I feel like Naz Reid. Some of these guys are options. I mean, the thing is, Brooks, like Dylan Brooks, will have a nice stretch of games. He's a decent streamer. Part of me wonders what Naz Reid, if everybody is healthy, what's he really giving you compared to like Anthony Davis potentially?
Yeah.
I have a tough time.
Quickly's tough for me. I know it's a 4-game week for
Same
Toronto,
with Pirtle.
but yeah.
What are they doing with him?
I mean, those two and Barrett have been the guys they've been resting most aggressively. Pirtle has played every other game since March 4th. So maybe that's the answer. That's a little better of a positional fit as well. I mean, again, you never know, but Toronto should have no interest in winning games. That's what the pattern has told us for 3 weeks now, that Pirtle doesn't play back-to-back games, even if they're not true back-to-backs on the schedule. Yeah, I don't. This is tough, man. This is the point of the season that we are.
I think that's what this tells you is how little confidence we have in Anthony Davis being a good fantasy option. So much like that, he's so much better than even Khalil Ware or Dylan Brooks because we have no faith. So it's not an easy choice.
All right, we'll do one last one here. I picked up Amen and AD, but to make room for this last week, should I drop Connect, McBride, Sar, or Zion? I'm fine dropping Connect. Yeah. You could look at the recent game logs, and obviously there's a reason why the minutes were increased. LeBron obviously missed time. Rui was missing time. Luka was in and out. All those guys were back on Saturday against Chicago when he played 7 minutes. So to me, that's a pretty easy one there. I mean, Zion, you never know how many games he's going to play, but if you're in a daily lineups league, I at least want the option to throw Zion out there when he is active. I will leave you on this, Alex. Marvin Bagley just signed a 10-day contract with the 76ers. So we got some company in that front court. That's going to wrap it up for the Monday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Pod. Thank you, as always, guys. Great questions in the chat. They've been awesome all season. If you're not subscribed to us here at RotoWire, please do that right now. Give this video a like if you're enjoying it. And if you're listening to this on your preferred podcast platform, go check us out over on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube channel. We'll have Kirian and Mike Barner coming up on Wednesday. Myself and Brandon Kravitz coming up later this week. Alex, Ken, and Shannon talking waivers on Friday as well. So we'll keep this thing going through the end of the NBA regular season. We'll talk to you soon.